James Melendez. Today I'm going to talk about the Great Resignation. There's more to come on that. Obviously not just in terms of the content of this video, but we're not through this period of time either. I'm going to talk about the background and potential solutions and approaches for organizations to take to stem the tide of the Great Resignation. Stay tuned. Now, the Great Resignation is something we are trying to define what it is, what it meant, why it happened, when will it end, and will it end? And so I think there are different questions people have, but there has to be a common understanding of what it is and the primary causes. We're not going to understand every single cause for it. And we can look back at a historical period of time, say the Renaissance, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. We still don't know the reasons why that started. Now, when you look at the job market, this is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's a really compelling, even shocking graph to look at. The curve here is showing high unemployment in the first quarter of March 2020. That's when COVID hits the United States and the world in general. And this is something where you have 14%, which is the highest unemployment rate in the United States since the Great Depression. This is a great shock to the economy. It's a great shock in terms of those people losing their jobs, and also the feeling of, was this going to be another Great Depression? Was it going to be worse than the Great Depression? And there was really no answers at that point. There was enough coordinated intervention that helped to turn this around. So the economy is doing well today still. This is recorded in May of 2022. But we also know that this period of time has been especially noted in the high point of, say, November 2021, when that was probably one of the highest levels recorded in the Great Resignation. It's actually 20-year high compared to other periods of time. But this happened for a variety of reasons. It didn't happen right after COVID in terms of lockdown. It actually happened, probably 1 year after that. One of the things people found is that they could apply for other jobs in places they did not live. So if you lived in New Jersey, you could apply for a job in Phoenix, or if you are in Portland, you could apply for a job in San Francisco. So there were a lot of opportunities that opened up, and people felt the ability to move on. But I think the more interesting question is, there were compelling reasons why that just continued. And the Great Resignation, in my opinion, is still occurring today. Maybe not at the high levels of November 2021, but they're still occurring. Now, the Renaissance is a period of time. The French historian Jules Michelet noted that, in the mid-19th century, the Renaissance, the period between, say, the 14th and 16th century, as commonly defined by a lot of historians as being this period of time that's a breakaway from the Middle Ages. And so he coins this term. This is a term that is commonly understood by a lot of people, at least what it represents, and a lot of people will figure upon, say, Florence and the Duomo and the art and artisans of that time. And I think this is a really interesting period because we still do not have consensus on the reasons for the Renaissance. We still don't even know when it really began. I would say it actually started in the 12th century, if not earlier. The causes that have tried to explain it are mercantilism, the Black Death or the plague, structural changes in politics and society, classical humanism, really rediscovering Roman and Greek texts, and the Crusades. Even all these together really don't respond in terms of why this happened. Maybe why did the Gothic architecture start, say, in the 12th century? And I do believe that's actually part of the Renaissance, in my opinion. And with all these features, you can't pinpoint in any specific place in Europe. A lot of people will center in terms of Florence because of the great artisans. So we look at this period of time in Florence because we see innovation. The Duomo is really some of the symbols of that period of time. These are visual symbols. They are actually structures that do exist today and are still remarkable even by today's standards. So what's remarkable about the Renaissance is, why did this happen in terms of it being such a dramatic experience and evolution compared to, say, the Middle Ages? So if we don't even know the real reasons, the real causes, which I think we will never know exactly what started it and what are the specific focal points, and they're probably related to things that are geographically specific. But we can look at other things that teach us about changes. We can look at, say, chaos theory, and this is a Lorentz attractor. We can look at, say, from the left to the middle to the right, and each of these are Lorentz attractors. Now, the Lorentz attractor is really about a dynamical system. Dynamical systems in action. So, in the following diagrams, after the initial Lorentz attractor, you'll see a movement and change in that Lorentz attractor, and it does change over time because it is dynamical. There are many variable changes in a dynamic system, and I think this is a nice visual to think about it, that this in our lives today is, say, our society and how we change through it, and how at any given time it's not necessarily understandable in any given moment, say, specific time point, and to understand what happened before, because this is happening very rapidly, very quickly, and it's a very fluid situation, and that's the Great Resignation as well. The Great Resignation happened for a lot of reasons, and if you look at one text, you won't find one specific answer. You'll find many answers on many different writers and people who are penning thoughts to ink on this, if you will. A lot of comments have been made about low pay and poor benefits. People moved on. One of the top notes, and I found this in the Pew Charitable research, was a lot of employees felt disrespected. They didn't feel that there was respect in their current organization, hence they moved onward. And some other points were terrible places to work, and I think that's obviously what people want to move away from. That's directly related to another comment that I make here, which is a difficult place to work, poor processes, and exhausting places to work. And many places would say they have a good quality work-life balance, but at the same point, what do you have to do to get the job done may not include a work-life balance. There's toxic cultures that still have not been responded to. Poor responses to COVID are still affecting many organizations today. The economy, while it's good today, may not be good tomorrow, or a year from now or 2 years from now. People also took time off because life had shown a greater importance in many ways, and they were able to do so, take time away because life is important, and COVID was a stark reminder of that. Job sector insecurities. There were people who were laid off en masse, who either were fired or let go or furloughed, and a lot of people just wanted to exit those industries. Hence, maybe there's a shortage in one particular type, service industry or retail and hospitality. So people left this en masse because they believed that while they did have some unemployment benefits, it was just far too difficult to depend on that, obviously, for a long run if you have a mortgage and things like that. And I think a lot of people just left. I knew people in some industries who just left because they were tired of the low pay. They were unfortunately let go. There was no plan to keep them, retain them. Even looking forward, the organizations didn't really make any commitments to them. A lot of people felt betrayal in terms of their line of work and the organizations they had worked for and depended on. So when organizations say they depend on employees, it's a two-way street, and a lot of people were not given any sort of assurance or "we will hire you back as soon as things get better" commentary. But at another point, someone might say, you know what, I want to work in an industry that is not affected if this happens in the near future. I want to always be employed, and that's not a bad thing to think about. People are trying to think about their families and themselves. So on the action side, I do believe it's important for organizations to really listen to individual contributors, to hear what they're saying, and to not just hear what they're saying, but to take action in terms of, say, individual encounters or meetings, skip-level meetings, engagement surveys. And that's an opportunity for an organization to address the problems that they know they have already. Often an organization knows that. The pulse point is obviously with their people managers to report up what is, say, difficulties or blockers to getting more efficiency in the organization. So a lot of this is known by management. Senior leadership knows about that. And it's incumbent on them to make an action, to make a change. And also, I do believe that organizations need to be people-centric. Organizational transformation. Now, this is important because when I highlight change management, I do believe that change management is not scary for everyone. So leaders believe that there's a lack of people lining up to do a change management exercise, but it's the other way around. I think a lot of organizations, there's a craving, right? I put organizational transformation for a reason. People do want organizations to transform for the better. They don't want a hard place or difficult place to work at, or to work that tribal knowledge is how things are done at an organization. People want a lot more harmonious ways of operating, and I think that's an important feature because I don't think all employees are thinking that things will be perfect. I do think employees are seeking improvements. So perhaps an organization is creating more problems than they're solving. And that is one issue that I think organizations, even if you do an audit, that is to see, are you doing the things you say you're going to do? It's not just that. It's not auditing. It's also looking at the organization and making sure the engagement questions actually line up to, does the organization understand itself? Where are things falling apart, or where are problem points, pain points? There are many of them. And I can say, working in organizations, That just doesn't seem to make a difference, and doesn't matter organizational type, again, for-profit, non-profit, governmental, religious, spiritual, etc. So, I'm also going to say technology is not always the solution. We do lean on technology for a lot of good reasons, right? You want to make sure you have some sources of truth. You want to make sure systems are running to capture specific transactions and to have that information documented and retrievable. But it is not always a solution in terms of how the organization is functioning. It is incumbent on the organization to really seek a better way of operating. Business process optimization. That is a huge, I would say, area that a lot of organizations ignore or think that their organizations are operating well, which is not true. A lot of organizations are operating very poorly, which does affect, say, things like profitability, efficiency, productivity, shareholder value if you're public. And I think these things come into play where if that's not being done, it's a disservice to everyone, all stakeholders. On the downside, non-action. There's a lot of that out there. And this has contributed to the Great Resignation. By not taking action on engagement surveys or believing that you have completed any sort of action points to follow up on an engagement survey. So I also think organizations really don't take the time to understand their turnover and maybe complain about, hey, people are just leaving us. We have great benefits. We have a good compensation package. We're competitive and things like that. But that's, perhaps not underscoring the reasons people leave. Decision management can be really poor in many organizations, and that can also lead to consistent and long-standing problems, say from team to team or individual to team. Poor processes or lack of processes or non-optimized processes. This is a huge bucket, and I do believe that if organizations were serious about this, they would employ I'd say business process optimization, how to improve what's happening. But also with that, I would tie together knowledge management. So I believe knowledge management and improved or robust and optimized processes help an organization to move forward. Lack of organizational controls, not just the obvious ones, let's say financial or regulatory, but many other controls that an organization should have to keep things running much more efficiently and smoothly. I like this quote, and I'm going to read this out loud because I think it's important. Sidney Harris, a journalist, said, quote, "History repeats itself, but in such cunning disguise that we never detect the resemblance until the damage is done." So organizations don't have the vision in many ways to really make a permanent change, an optimized way of doing things. I think it's really about process versus personality as an example, addressing the issues. I think an organization, again, all types are guilty of this, and all types have the opportunity to make the change. And so there's always a stakeholder that will be benefiting from this, a customer, somebody who's buying a service, perhaps it's a taxpayer, perhaps it's a shareholder. There's someone who will benefit from that in addition to the employee base, and I mean contractors as well. So everyone at the organization will stay at an organization as long as it's a good organization to work at. I do believe if an organization is willing to make any sort of addressing major topical issues, that organization can be an organization of improvement, an organization that people will seek out to work at, and also, I think, create a better value in terms of service or products and even share prices if it's a for-profit company. Let's talk about these four bucketed areas. One is traction on engagement. Follow up on surveys, engagement surveys, really, essentially important, not just cosmetic ones, not just quick hits, but ones that are substantive. And I think if an organization is going to do this, some organizations cadence from, say, a yearly engagement score or survey, and implementing meaningful changes and actions, as I just mentioned. Now, process optimization, and I would say my call out here, it's always process over personality. So a lot of organizations run through tribal knowledge, and that's a really bad way to operate. It eventually breaks down because tribal knowledge is, in my opinion, a manual way of doing things versus a process. So when things happen in a manual way, that is, many things are, say, required to be done, and there's a lot of room for error. So process can help even out any sort of fluctuations in quality and delivery of service and product. This is one huge area where I think it's really important to think about. And also, if you have no process or it's difficult to follow the process or implement anything from that, then it's not going to be followed. There's not going to be a quality step or quality manner in terms of delivering product or service. And this doesn't mean just to the end customer, it means internally too. It means that if you have another partner you're relying on to get your job done, and it's done in such a, say, manual or tribal way, there will be problems that will surface from that, and there will be a problem with consistency of that delivery. Findable knowledge is so important. Organizations really don't think about knowledge management, and knowledge management is not IT. It's not just one system. So it's not just a repository of information. It's not just a singular system. It is a way of doing things. Findable knowledge is really important, especially because not all people, individual contributors or even managers, are at the organization 24 hours a day. So knowledge should be findable, it should be codified, it should be something that people can look at and reference, and there should not be golden mysteries that exist at many organizations today. This is, if I had to pick out one problem, the number one problem, this would probably be it here. Retention plan. A lot of organizations don't have retention plans, and this is something you know about all the time, and that is, who hasn't turned in their resignation at some point to go to another job? Are you sought after to stay at that job? Some people would probably say, and I've heard this quite often, no, there was no counter offer, there was no, questioning or, asking me to reconsider, maybe even a title change, or maybe there's something that would keep me there, and so there's no retention plan in that. So improving organizations and teams is important. Decision management, making decisions. Organizations, I would say in general, are really not good at this. And you have an example of your own experience. An organization may make decisions, and it's not, does an organization make a decision or not? Most will make a decision when needed. And sometimes, yes, of course, an organization doesn't make a decision that it needed to make. And that unto itself is a decision. Now, when you make a decision, it's, do you explain the why, the context of it, the people affected by it. Is anyone talking to those individuals? Is it codified so it's something that is, transparent and seeable and viewable? And it's one where this is an opportunity to not pit employee against employee. So when one organization makes a decision in favor of, say, one employee group, because maybe there's a way an organization is doing things, that it favors one group over another, and the other group is subjected to that. So pitting employee against employee, that is a decision that an organization makes that may affect one group or one team to another team. And that is something that needs to be explained. As an example, you might use language like this. We made this decision today as a one-time exception. This is one way where an organization can talk about something that maybe deviates from a usual decision that's made. And really everybody in that affected group or teams, plural, knows about that, and so people are not pitted against each other, and it's really known, and that group that had an exception is made aware that it is an exception, not the rule, and they can't keep going back for changes on something. There are a lot of reasons for the Great Resignation. I do think that if we start to chip away at some of these issues, and I do believe that process optimization is really important. So not just having a pulse point with engagement with your employees, but also meeting that engagement, face to face, and really, pivoting towards organizational improvements and optimization, and really looking towards process versus personality. Personality-driven organizations are good while that person is there, and not so good when they leave. And so I think there's a lot of things that really come to play that can help an organization improve and to reduce the Great Resignation. It is important for an organization to upgrade how they deal with individual contributor questions, comments, concerns, and it's really important for them to make significant, meaningful changes that they are felt it is an easier place to work. It's a place where knowledge is findable and actions are possible. Thank you for watching. I'd appreciate your comments and questions down below. Stay tuned for more content from James All About Business. Thank you.